Where's mine? There it is. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. And hey, welcome to the all new B2B hour on AutoConversion. This is our new monthly webcast that we are facilitating here on AutoConversion. It's for B2B marketing and sales professionals, business owners, entrepreneurs, you name it. Today is Wednesday, March 10th. I'm Ryan Girardi. Hey, thanks for joining us today. So our general theme for this show is on how to stay connected and engage with customers and strategic partners and employees, all those aspects of your network that make up your ecosystem. We offer a unique product here on AutoConversion for you to do these things, and we want you here to learn and network and grow your personal brand, your professional brand, your own network, and your online reputation. Now, today, our focus is going to be on silencing your inner critic and leading with confidence. This is the subtitle for the new book by Kris Kelso, head title is Overcoming the Imposter. The book offers entrepreneurs and leaders a practical look at imposter syndrome. The book explores the inner voice that downplays our own accomplishments while amplifying those of others, and gives readers powerful tools needed to expose the imposter's methods and emerge as more effective and confident leaders. Pretty juicy. And in a few moments, I'm going to be bringing Kris on stage for a brief conversation about his new book. Now, after that, we have a second short interview lined up, and followed by a 30-minute discussion panel on the subject. In our second interview, we have my good friend and leadership coach, Lance Knaub, who will be interviewing Jeremiah Fox, a restaurateur, entrepreneur, and also now a podcast host who has powered through the pandemic with his 3 businesses and started a new business serving other entrepreneurs who need help. And then, as I already said, after these 2 interviews, at the bottom of the hour, we'll be opening up a panel discussion with all of us and anyone else who joins us backstage. And speaking of backstage, what I want you to do is head on over to autoconversion.net. And I think what I should do probably is try to share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about here. And if you look under the Grow menu, which now that I think I probably can't load it is seamlessly. There we go. Look under the Grow menu, there's B2B Marketing Pros. If you want to get access to join these panels and be part of the Q&A and be part of the panel discussion, just get yourself registered with our free discussion group, B2B Marketing Pros. And every month when we do this, because we're going to do this once a month, you'll have an opportunity to do so. So what I want to do is ask Kris to go ahead and get ready. We're going to be back in just a moment with our interview with Kris Kelso. And there we are. Hello, Kris. Welcome to the B2B Hour. Great to have you here.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yes, and hopefully your week's getting off to a great start. You're down in Nashville, from what I recall. How long you lived in Nashville?
Yeah, I've been here for 26 years or so now, more than half my life for sure.
All right, so you've really seen it develop then, because I know
a lot of change over that time. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Well, great to have you here, helping us kickstart this the new concept here on AutoConversion. And a little backstory, folks. This is what's special about listening. I think listening to the universe, and just what's special in general is I was on a session, I think with Lance, if I recall, who's going to be up here in a moment, and the whole idea of imposter syndrome came up, which was a new concept to me. I'd never heard that concept. And we briefly talked about it, and I got an idea for what it was. And then after Lance and I were talking, I was checking some emails, and there was an email from a mutual friend, Sherry Traxler, who was introducing me and Kris, and as the author of Overcoming the Imposter. And I thought, wow, that's pretty timely there. So, do you believe in coincidences, Kris, or do I have a message to be heard here?
I think it's serendipity or divine intervention, however you want to look at it. It was meant to be, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. And so that kind of led to today's program. So we have about a little less than 15 minutes here. So let's get started. For starters, is this your first book?
Yeah.
First published
It is
book?
my first book. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've written some articles and different things, short form, but this is my first book. And so it was a really interesting process and a lot of work, but also a lot of fun to put it together.
Sure. How much time would you say you from start to finish till you got that thing published?
Boy, it was a pretty accelerated pace from what I've learned since. I think it was 9 months from start to actual publication date. And I didn't know how aggressive that was until I started talking with other authors and publishers and realized that books don't often come together that quickly. But I had a fantastic team that really helped me put all this together.
Yeah, I'd say 9 months is pretty quick. So congratulations on that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's get into the subject matter. So why don't you start by defining how would you define imposter syndrome?
Yeah, imposter syndrome, it's a psychological term that was coined in the 1970s originally, and it refers to a pattern of thinking in which a person tends to overvalue other people's accomplishments and success and undervalue or even doubt the reality of their own success. So, as an entrepreneur or a public speaker or in whatever context someone might be in, I may look at Ryan and say, well, Ryan's really successful because he's smart and educated and he's got business savvy and he makes all the right decisions and he seems to really know what he's doing. But my success, boy, has sure involved a lot of luck and timing and relationships and happening to know the right people. And there's a whole lot of ways that it could have gone terribly wrong and a whole lot of mistakes I made along the way. And so maybe I'm not as legit as someone else that I'm seeing.
Kind of like the grass is greener on the other side in a way.
Yeah, it is. It is. And what happens is, we tend to compare the reality of our own life and work to a very polished and filtered version of someone else's work because we don't see the full picture. We never know the full story of anybody else's life or their business or their success. So it's really easy to fall into that comparison trap where we're, holding ourselves up against another standard that's not really truly reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, let's start with what this means to you. I always find when somebody has a message and writes about something, there's probably, you could even say there's some trauma, but this is probably something that impacted you. So maybe give us that story, what this means to you, and why did you need to get this message out?
It is deeply personal to me. I am an entrepreneur. I have been self-employed entrepreneurial for the last 14 years. I've founded and run 2 different companies during that time. And today I mostly coach and consult with other business owners and their leadership teams. But particularly in the first several years of my entrepreneurial journey, I had this nagging voice in the back of my head that would tell me that I was just a poser, that I was faking my way through it, that I, really didn't know what I was doing and really didn't deserve to be at the table or in the room with a lot of the people that I was interacting with. For me personally, some of that came from a lack of education. I don't have a college degree. I never actually went to college at all. And that's a whole nother long story of my origin story of how I got to where I am. But But I would sit in rooms with other business people, other business owners and business leaders. I was consulting with executives and even board of directors of companies. And I would feel like, man, one of these days they're all going to figure out that I didn't go to college, and then it's all going to come crumbling down around me. So the thing about imposter syndrome is it's a very common phenomenon. It's something that a lot of people deal with, but it's unique and personal for every individual. Many people may not struggle with a insecurity about a lack of education, but they have some other part of their life story, another part of their career that they feel like is the key weakness that's going to hobble them or hold them back. So yes, it was deeply personal for me, something that I wrestled with for a long time, not knowing what it was. And when I learned about imposter syndrome as a thing, just that education, that understanding that it's something that happens to a lot of people was such a relief. And so as I began to talk to other people about it over time, it became clear that not enough people understood and had heard of the phenomenon, and something needed to be written and more education needed to happen. And that's what drove me to write this book.
It reminds me of a friend of mine used to always say, knowing's half the battle. Right?
It
Once
is.
you have that knowledge,
Yes.
then you can start to attack it. How long ago was that for you?
So the experience was early in my entrepreneurial career. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 14 years, and it happened quite a bit. The learning about it, though, was just 5 or 6 years ago, when sort of the light bulb came on during a conversation with an executive coach. And I've worked with many throughout my career, and sort of that eye-opening moment of, oh, this is not just me, this is a thing. Really started to change my perspective. And as I started to study and learn about it, it really helped me a lot to understand what was going on. And that's when I began to develop techniques and tactics to counteract that voice and to turn that insecurity actually into motivating energy and passion and fuel for the things that I wanted to do. So the process of that turn started 5 or 6 years ago. The idea for this book came about 3 years ago when I wrote an article about imposter syndrome, and it kind of went like wildfire. It ended up with almost 50,000 views and a lot of comments and feedback. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've struck a nerve here. There's a real need for this. And so that started the process of incubating this book idea. And then it was about a year ago now that I actually sat down and started the process of writing and putting it together.
Okay. Now, is imposter syndrome, is that like a formal clinical term, or is it more just a label that's been, that we've developed in our culture?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, because it is not a clinical diagnosis. And in fact, a lot of people, particularly in the psychology community, don't like the term imposter syndrome. They prefer to use something like the imposter experience, the imposter phenomenon, because it's not a clinical diagnosis or a problem, that needs a particular kind of treatment in that way. I continue to use imposter syndrome simply because that's the term most people are familiar with. But in fact, if you're struggling with imposter syndrome or this imposter phenomenon, you're not broken. It's not a problem that you need to seek a doctor for. It's just a mindset shift and an understanding that you need to develop and change the way you view a few key things, like how you view failure and success, how you relate to your community, and those kind of things.
Right, because it's not like you're going to eliminate it's really just self-doubt. Could we chalk it up to self-doubt? I mean, would you say that we all have some level of doubt? It probably serves a function, which is going to kind of segue into the second part of my question here. But yeah, it's not like a disease or a condition that you're going to eliminate or eradicate. It's just something you're constantly facing, and you just have to learn, maybe develop protocols and tools on how to respond.
That's exactly right. It is self-doubt, and it's a form of fear. The underlying basis of imposter syndrome is the fear of failure, particularly the fear of failure in public, and the fear of being exposed, the fear of being uncovered, or that people are going to figure out that you're not what they think you are. And interestingly, the antidote, in my experience and the study and research that I've done, the antidote for it is opening up and being honest and vulnerable with people about who you really are. So the fear of the underlying fear of imposter syndrome is vulnerability and exposure, but the antidote is vulnerability and exposure. That's one of the main ways that you overcome this feeling of self-doubt and insecurity.
When I listen to talk about, being vulnerable, you didn't say authentic, but you implied, being authentic. Yeah. I would say that is a cultural shift that we are seeing in modern business. Yes. The idea of being authentic and vulnerable to some degree. When you think back to traditional business, it's tough. It's a charade, but now we have two. I mean, because it's not like that tradition's gone. There's still that hard shell attitude out there. But you'd agree, there is a new cultural shift of openness and vulnerability.
There is a shift. And I think the rise of imposter syndrome, the reason it's become a thing that people talk about and wrestle with, is largely because of that culture that developed of, in order to succeed, you've got to appear as though you have it all together. You've got to come across as the confident, secure, very knowledgeable leader. And we are seeing a shift now in the culture where people are realizing that sort of faking it, covering your mistakes, pretending that you've got everything in order, that doesn't ultimately work. It works against you more than it works for you in the long run. And so we're seeing a shift towards vulnerability and authenticity as leadership traits that not only are people craving, but that actually produce better results as leaders. And so that shift is going to help us to overcome and eliminate, to diminish the effects of imposter syndrome that I believe has been brought on by that, previous unhealthy culture of pretending and posing and trying to exhibit something that may not totally be there.
But there's a fine line between, I think, being open and vulnerable to being maybe Debbie Downer or a poor me attitude, because no one likes the loser, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a really fine line there. Do you address that in the book?
I do, and I talk about what I call the difference between proud insecurity, where you're acting confident on the outside to mask insecurity on the inside, and sort of dealing with that tension, and moving towards what I refer to as humble confidence. You can be confident and humble at the same time. You can be honest about where your expertise and experience and knowledge starts and ends, and where those boundaries are, while also portraying a confidence in yourself, in your abilities. And it's really a shift from I'm confident because I have all the answers to I'm confident because I know how to go get the answers, and I'm willing to bring the right people around me who can help me get the right answers. And so you don't have to eliminate that confidence in order to be humble and authentic and vulnerable. You just have to shift it from a confidence, an outward appearance of confidence based on performance and projection, to a true inward confidence in I may not have everything I need right now, but I can go get it, and I will ultimately be successful.
I like, while you were saying that, Mike on the live chat said, we don't have it all together, we bring it all together. He actually said that before you were saying that, so he's tuning into your message. Just so I'm clear, you said proud insecurity versus humble confidence. That's what you said.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm quoting that in there. We're out of time. I knew this would go fast, and we got to bring up folks. We're going to bring up Lance and Jeremiah for their interview. And then after their interview, which will be just about 15 minutes, then we're going to bring Kris and myself will come back on, and we're going to open this up to a panel discussion. If you want to be on the panel, folks, all you need to do is go to autoconversion.net and then look under the Grow menu and look for B2B marketing right there. Get yourself registered, and that'll send you a link to join us in the panel for future shows. If you're already in the group, then you would have received that link yesterday. And if you want to hop up here and be on the panel, then you have the link in your email. Just check for your email from me related to the program. Kris, before we exit,
Yes.
is there, in 30 seconds less, anything you'd like to add that maybe we didn't cover in our conversation?
Well, you touched on the fact that imposter syndrome is not something you defeat and kill, and it's sort of a chapter in your life and it's gone and over. And that is true. It's something that you probably are always going to encounter in one way or another, but you can learn to take those feelings of insecurity and change them from something that holds you back to something that actually pushes you forward, something that is motivating. And that's a really important shift if you're going to overcome and master this problem in your life.
Awesome. And I was just kind of setting the stage for Jeremiah and Lance while you're speaking to that, but nice finish. So Kris, we're going to exit. Thank you so much for doing this.
Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes after Lance and Jeremiah. Give me 1 second, folks. Okay, Lance, you're there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
And Jeremiah, you're there, right?
I am.
All right, I'm leaving, and you guys are going to be good to go. Here we go.
Hey, Jeremiah. Well, Ryan, thank you. And Kris, that was incredible. Can't wait to talk a little bit more. So, Jeremiah, you and I, this is fun to turn the tables on the interview. I mean, you and I met through our mutual friend, Dr. Sakib, and we talked early in the pandemic. Hard to believe it was that long ago, but you and I have really spent a lot of time together, and masterminds and clubhouse rooms just last night with one of your mentors. So I'm really excited to talk to you. The first thing I want to ask you about is, your passion. You have so much obvious passion for entrepreneurship and small business ownership and even the community. Where would you really say that stems from? What's the root of that?
I would say my passion and my desire to help people is very innate. It's something that was pointed out as a young person, even in middle school. I was always somebody there to help and offer advice. And as I got older and started to develop skills, people knew I was the person to come to if you needed something. So I've always kind of been a facilitator in that way. But it's funny, spending 25 years in the service industry, I didn't always connect the two, but I had, 25 to 30 years to hone that skill of bringing my passion for helping people through service. And at a certain point, the lines kind of got connected as I learned more about entrepreneurship and that as a vehicle to really express your passion and be helpful and be of service to people. But I think it really comes down to just like DNA and what's inside of me, and life's experiences offered me the opportunity to hone those skills, where if maybe I took another route, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. But those things really helped bring it out of me more. And I had great people along the way to encourage it as well.
That's awesome. Listen, speaking of passion, I want to jump right into one of your biggest passions, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, I know you're doing a lot of, rooms, even in Clubhouse. And, I've certainly connected you with, mutual friends of mine, Matt Falvey. So I know you're consistently training. You go to New York and train with Renzo Gracie, and I know you've earned your purple belt. So in what ways would you say that, this type of training in the martial arts has impacted your approach to business? How do you connect the two?
Two main reasons, or two main things I would say, martial arts values that really will help you in your mindset in business. One consistent theme in martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think if there's anything the last year taught us is that the road is not always going to be easy, and you need to develop that resiliency to get through the hard times because they are coming. The second one is that it's a marathon and not a sprint, meaning that it's not a path of instant gratification. The road to black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is long and it takes a lot of commitment. And if there's one message that existing business owners and also up and coming entrepreneurs and people that are thinking of going into business for themselves need to really carry around inside of them is that it takes commitment. It takes day in, day out grinding. There will be times that it will not be fun, but if you're really passionate about it and you really want to make this thing happen, it's going to take that commitment, and you got to think long term, like pushing yourself to links that if somebody asked you at the beginning of the journey, do you think you're going to make it? You might say no, but pushing yourself beyond those points of discomfort, you will find that there is success. There is opportunity past that, and it's a meandering stream. It's not a straight line. Just like if you were to run a marathon, it's unlikely the ground will be flat the whole time for 26 miles. The same is very true in business and in martial arts.
Good stuff. I mean, that kind of leads me right into the next thing I want to talk about. I mean, you're navigating multiple businesses through, a pandemic, racial inequality, some serious political tension. I want to know how you pulled it off and even started a new revenue stream / new business, and also how that experience, connects to marketing and customer service, customer relations, which I know are important to you.
Yeah, it really came down to falling back on those martial arts values. I say many times, if I had not been training this whole time and had that value system instilled in me on a daily basis, I likely would have burned several of my businesses to the ground, even before the pandemic. But as it set in, as I mentioned earlier, that it was a time of extreme challenge. And when you train challenges on a daily basis, that task seems a little easier. They say in martial arts, repetition is the mother of all skill. If you want something to become easier, you have to do it over and over. It makes it less of a task. So I was kind of prepared. Plus, being in the restaurant industry all this time, you get banged around. We were always frontline workers. It's a tough grind. It's very scrappy. So I just really drew on those skills and the teaching of martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in terms of, I know this is going to be a tough time, but if I can persevere, there will be opportunity on the other end. There will be some payoff. And I just cared about my businesses and my community so much, which ties into the marketing. It was about the people. It was about the people that we engage with and the people that we service. And if I wouldn't have made that commitment, we would have been losing all that. Forget about the financial loss. It would have been a loss to the community. It would have been a loss of connection for so many people at a time when they really, really needed it. So that was the real fire, because there were times we didn't make much money, but that was what really pushed me through and kept me going and committed to the whole process.
Just last night in Clubhouse, the topic of social media and online businesses versus brick and mortar businesses, and even someone had kind of been belittled because they were a brick and mortar business and they didn't really have like the digital and online skills. So what would you say, what is the role for, digital marketing, online marketing, social media? How does that fit into your businesses? How does that fit into the success of today's entrepreneurs, especially ones who need to plow through these really challenging times like you've just gotten through?
Yeah, I mean, my foray into digital marketing and digital outreach and social media really began with my radio show. Prior, I was running a number of brick and mortar businesses, and I didn't put enough emphasis on it. And there would have definitely been more success early on if I would have. But I learned through promoting my radio show and developing that brand and my personal brand, how important it was. And then the pandemic sets in, and all of a sudden people can't go out anymore, or much less. People are less exploratory, and people really were relying on digital outreach and social media for connection and for learning about what was still in existence. So if you weren't convinced prior that you need social media and that you need digital outreach, you better be convinced now, because it's going to be a major part of your marketing going forward. Two things that really make it efficient and worthwhile. One, there's no gatekeeper. You are the executive producer of your digital output. Sure, you can outsource some help, but you really get to set the tone. You get to express your values, your culture, why people should connect with you, and you can do it with real sincerity. And the other reason is scale, like you and I having this conversation right now. If it wasn't for digital outreach and it wasn't for social media, maybe only a handful of people. Maybe you and I would be the only ones hearing this, but you have this opportunity to reach thousands of people in a very efficient manner. Thousands, I should say millions, in a very efficient manner. And that when you get down to the nitty gritty of success in business, it really comes down to efficiency and entrepreneurship for sure. If you're running multiple businesses, you have to be very efficient with your time. You have to be very efficient with your outreach, and you have to be very efficient with your money. And not for nothing, a lot of it is very inexpensive or free, which is another reason why it's a must.
Well, I'm a huge advocate for the profit first concept, right? So it ties into that, and definitely like a little bit of Gary Vee, right? With social media today, the world is now, our stage as entrepreneurs. And for me, coming up, my first business starting in 2004, I think that was, it wasn't even normal or standard to have a website at that time. So I'm definitely a brick and mortar business owner. And, with my new business, Denali, I am learning all these skills, and there's a lot to learn, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of opportunity. So next thing I want to talk to you about is this emphasis on community. I know you've lived and worked in your community in Brooklyn for more than 15 years. And I know, you've really actually, assisted the other business owners and the community to really, persevere and plow through these challenging times. Tell us a little bit about what community means to you and how you've fostered that sense of community and how you've helped the community.
So community to me in all of my businesses is one of my 3 pillars. Community is everything. It's your foundation. With our restaurant, if we wouldn't have been tied in with our community, we would have done terrible our first year. It would not have survived. As the pandemic set in, we really relied on our community, and that was the foundation of our success. You need that. If you're in digital outreach, it's no different. If you're working within digital communities, you want to build connections. Social media, the same way. You can hop on social media and not have a community, and it's going to be crickets whenever you're posting and you're trying to get feedback and engagement. But if you foster a community, you're going to get support, and it's no different if you're in a brick and mortar business. It's no different if it's a support group. You need that community of people. So that's always your foundation. From there, you can start to grow. You can start to, I think Tony Robbins said, you can think of external growth in terms of maybe 5%. So if that's all you're going to get from external, you really need to foster what's around you, whether it's your physical location or it's symbiotic relationships through, your digital businesses. Fostering community, like you said, being helpful to the other people in your community, the other people in your industries, and the symbiotic industries. It's huge. That's really what's going to set you up for success, because again, it's a meandering stream. The tide will recede at times, and if you haven't built that foundation, you will feel it. And then when the tide rises, you still want to really foster that sense of community, because that will be the foundation for extra success, more success as you go forward.
So through this community, work and involvement and paying it forward, I know you're serving, a larger number of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. So tell us what kind of problems you're solving, what industries they're in, who you're helping, and how you're doing it.
It could be any industry really. The people that I tend to get requests for help from are people it could be people that have been in business for a while, and maybe, they're not savvy on social media and digital outreach. And I've spent enough time with it now where I'm no pro, but I have the skill set to get you started. And it can be very personalized, and I encourage that. So a lot of people need help with that. And the idea of podcasting, which is something that I'm becoming a veteran at too, to help with your promotion. People are really curious about that. And especially as things become more and more digital. I mean, everybody's on Zoom right now. People are much more comfortable, and they're like, oh, okay, I can use this. This can be of service to me and be a marketing tool for me. And then just getting started. I mean, I'm the type of person, talking about imposter syndrome. And I remember when I first heard that word, I was like, oh, I don't suffer from that. I literally got to the point where it was like, oh, we're going to open a business tomorrow. Like, let's just go do it. Let's just do it now. Where other people were hesitating, I was always the person to push it. But it does show up in a lot of ways. Either if you're, trying to start your new business, or if you've been in business for a while and you're trying to just expand, you're trying to rope in new things. you need somebody to bounce those ideas off of, somebody to speak to. My dear friend and coach, Belinda Di Giambattista, calls it being an accountability partner. You don't have to necessarily, have the coach badge or the consultant badge, but just somebody that you could speak to who's been through it, who understands the nuances of starting a business, lifting a business up, kind of from the ashes if it's been down. Somebody that can help you and offer sound advice through those times, so that you do push beyond that uncomfortable period and find the success you're looking for.
No, that's fantastic. And I do remember, speaking to you initially, and your statement was really along the lines of imposter syndrome. I think you used the phrase, getting out of your own way. So, and we're going to roll this right into our discussion and connect all the dots. So let's keep it going.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Jeremiah, that was awesome, my friend.
Thank you, Lance. Always a pleasure.
Hey guys, good stuff. Love listening to your responses there, Jeremy. Let me bring Kris up here. So folks, we're going to get started here on our panel discussion. So Kris and I are back, and anyone else who's joined us backstage on the studio, we can bring you up here in the panel, or we can just turn your microphone on to get started with any questions. So we do want to keep the focus here, guys, on Imposter, right? Something every single business owner, professional goes through for sure. And so that's what we want to keep the panel discussion on. I'm going to go ahead and bring Mark on. Let me turn this off. And Mark has a question, I think, for Jeremiah. So Mark, let's bring you on. And you should be able to throw out the first question here.
So Jeremiah, I'm curious. You're running multiple businesses, which is multiple opportunities to have imposter syndrome. And you've got Talk Radio NYC that you're doing, and you've got people who reach out to you for coaching. How do you keep your headspace clear with all that and stay focused on your core values?
So part of it, again, I think is just DNA. I've been told I have a particular ability to hyper focus. I'm solid under pressure. In fact, I kind of like it. I feel like I perform better under pressure. When after setting up so many businesses, I love the chaos of getting them started in the unknown. And as soon as they're running smoothly, I get bored and I want to go on to the next thing. A friend of mine who knows me quite well saw me on the street kind of 2 weeks into the pandemic, and I'm running back and forth between all the businesses and dealing with all these things. And she just looked at me and said, "You love this, don't you?" And I was smiling from ear to ear. And then seriously, having a daily physical practice that engages both the mind and the body, keeps the sword sharp. So I maintain my training, even when there were periods I could only train with my wife and my daughters. Regular jujitsu, martial arts, in the morning, getting up first thing, and just addressing that, and getting the wheels turning and clearing the mind. In martial arts, we often talk about emptying the cup. The bow is a representation of that, and I just kept that as a daily practice. And it just fueled the fire. And yeah, I as tough as it was, I look back on last year with mainly fond memories.
That's awesome.
It's a good question, Mark. I forgot to mention, Lance, you have to leave early. You're going to have to exit probably in like 5 or 10 minutes, I think, right? So we're going to lose you. It'll just be the four of us moving forward. And again, anyone else, if you're on the live YouTube, if you have the link to get up here and want to ask questions, you can. So Kris, let me turn the table to you. Do you want to pose any questions to Jeremiah based off of his conversation with Lance?
Questions for Jeremiah. Great conversation. Enjoyed the discussion. I guess my question for you would be, in running these different businesses, and the various experiences you've had, and even juggling those, what are the areas where you run into a form of imposter syndrome? Either feeling like, hey, maybe I'm in over my head, or am I really the the right guy to do this, or how is this going to turn out? Talk about your experience with that inner critic that's trying to tell you this isn't going to work.
So it's funny, I was interviewing the lady I mentioned earlier, Belinda, on my show a couple of years ago, and she said the word, and I didn't know what it meant. She brought it up in the show, and I had her clarify, and I said, oh, I don't have that. I'm good. I'm like a very confident person. I walk with my chest out. I was like, nope, not a problem. But it kept coming up, similar to the conversation you and Ryan were having. I kept hearing it. I kept digging deeper into what it was. And then I started to realize that it does show up in small ways for me. The first way it was pointed out to me by a friend of mine who works for a very big social media house here in New York City, who was giving me advice on social media for my businesses. He was talking to me about putting it all out there and really trying to get myself out of the way when I'm posting and just let things kind of talk for themselves. If I'm not doing A/B testing on the post, how can I be the person deciding what people want? And I was kind of stuck in this way. And I was saying to him, no, I don't know, but I'm uncomfortable posting it because what if people don't? And he was like, how do you know? Like, that was your imposter syndrome showing up. And I was like, oh my God, there it is again. There's that word. So then I started to take it seriously. So for a person like me who's quite confident, I find that it does still show up in these little ways. And now I'm really dealing with it, that I'm but folding in a digital service, a digital business, an online business, a coaching like business and service to people. I've never done that before, not formally. A lot of people have come to me for help, and there are definitely times where I'm like, man, I'm swimming in deeper waters. Is this okay? Am I the person for the job? And there's a person on either shoulder. So the one is saying that, and the other one is like the cheerleader. And I just try to listen to the cheerleader like a way forward.
Yeah.
But these days, because I'm really going for it, it comes up often. I hear it all the time. And I just have to, again, the martial arts training is like, be a good finder, like look for something good that you did. Forget about the things that maybe you slipped up on. And I keep putting myself in these situations, whether it's interviews like this, a clubhouse room. I do 2 live broadcasts a week where I'm just being forced out of my comfort zone to try to talk about this, to try to promote it, to try to, in a way, entice people to participate in it. So practice helps with it too, but it shows up, in a bunch of small ways. And I just, you guys pointed it out, awareness is the first step. You have to see it for what it is and accept it and say, okay, I'm the one holding myself back here. Nobody else is stopping me. And so now I look for those opportunities and I try to do the opposite of what the bad guy on my shoulder is telling me. If he's saying, don't do that post or don't do that interview, I'm like, no, we're doing that interview. We're doing the post. So that's like my first way of reconciling it. And maybe the quality isn't there. Maybe the value isn't seen at first, but it's pushing beyond that first uncomfortable stage. And then you can start to tweak it and make it better.
The interesting thing about, as you're describing, is that statistically, studies have shown that imposter syndrome is more prevalent among high achievers. So the more ambitious you are, the more driven, the more you're trying to stretch yourself, the more likely you are to put yourself in situations where you're outside your comfort zone, where you're in over your head, where you're trying for something that you don't have the experience or the track record to prove to yourself that you can do it, but you're experimenting, you're stretching, and so this is why it actually creeps up on people like yourself, people like us that are entrepreneurs, more than we realize. And so many people see entrepreneurs in that light of, well, they're bold and they're ambitious and they're risk takers. How could they be insecure or have this imposter syndrome? And the fact is that it does creep up on you simply because you're continually putting yourself in a position where you don't know how it's going to turn out. You're taking risks, you're trying things, you're doing things that have never been done before. And so it can creep up on you. But the key is, and you nailed it, is to recognize that voice that says you're about to put something at risk or you're about to fail at something, and to turn that around to you're about to learn something, you're about to do something for the first time, you're about to accomplish something great. So I love that approach. You're doing exactly the right thing. You're going to feel that if you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, but you have learned to overcome it by changing that narrative and turning it into motivation rather than fear and anxiety.
I would even add to that, and I always respected this about Grant Cardone, because his kind of attitude is, if your motivation for not doing something is coming from a place of fear, then that automatically tells you that's what you said, Jeremiah. That means you have to do it, because that fear is going to grip you until you overcome that. Before we lose Lance, this comes up in some of our conversations, but maybe you could share with the panel and the audience here, how are you impacted by your own imposter syndrome and self-doubt in your work? Can you share that?
Sure. I think, hearing Kris say that, it affects entrepreneurs and people really reaching and stretching makes me feel a little bit better, because I certainly know that I've felt this and believe it's true lately. And, just in the last 7 days, speaking to a friend of mine who's double board certified as a physician and neurologist and pain management physician, Dr. Andrew Medvedovsky, and he started the largest medical marijuana business in South Jersey and sold that, moved to Florida, just started a new beverage, hit 5, incredibly smart, wildly successful entrepreneur. He hadn't heard the term. He researched it and we're going back and forth. So I can definitely relate. And for me, reinventing myself, I'm a physical therapist. I'm trained as a physical therapist, and, I'm very confident in helping people that way. But to now, the last few years serving entrepreneurs, it's like a wave. It comes in and out. And that's actually my question for you, Kris. I feel like there's a few things on my mind recently. I heard an interview on Lewis Howes, probably not getting the name right, but Priyanka Chopra, I think was her name. She's like a Bollywood actress. And what she said regarding confidence was that it's like a muscle and it just needs to be exercised. And we shouldn't expect to be strong and actually be confident without practice. But then when I've heard, a lot of, experts and neuroscientists say, thoughts create actions, and it sort of all begins with our mind. Mm-hmm. However, neuroscientist Andrew Huberman from Stanford says the opposite, that we have to actually take the action first. So, what's the root cause? What's the way to approach it?
Yeah, well, those are two interesting perspectives, right? Do thoughts create actions, or do we have actions? I think both are true in the sense that it's a self-reinforcing system. So you can't take an action without thinking about it, and you have to manage your thoughts to have the confidence to take that action. But then taking the action is going to reinforce the confidence that you can do it. And in particular, this is something that I learned from one of my executive coaches years ago. I was at a particularly pivotal point in my career and having to shift my business towards something that I'd never done before and did not feel confident, was really questioning whether I could do it. And he taught me about the difference between self-esteem or self-confidence and self-efficacy. And the key difference is, he said, self-esteem is largely an emotion. It's a feeling. I feel good about myself. I feel confident. But feelings are very fickle, and feelings are easily manipulated, and we can't live by our feelings. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is a fact-based assessment of your track record, your history, of the things that you've done, and in particular, the times that you have tried something that you had never done before, that you had no experience, or where you were insecure and not confident, but you managed to figure it out and succeed in spite of your lack of experience. And he simply said to me, Kris, you don't have the track record to show that you've done this many times before, but you do have the track record to show that you've done many other things for the first time and been successful. And that's the evidence, that's the self-efficacy that you've got to rely on to be confident that you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And that even if it's not a smashing success, there'll be learning involved, there'll be growth, there'll be development, and you'll eventually figure it out. So I think that again is another mind shift that is really important to recognize, that we can look back on our history and we don't have to see the exact things we're trying to do. We just need to be able to rely on the fact that we're learners, we're explorers, and we're growth oriented, and we can try something new and be confident. Again, going back to that humble confidence of, I don't have to have the answers. I just have to believe that I can figure out the answers.
You made me think of Jim Collins with that, with Good to Great. It's very similar, and that's a scientific study, as you guys know. And one of the final conclusions was, you need to be so confident that that you can weather any storm, pandemics. I mean, you will,
Yes.
save the ship and take your team to the finish line. However, you need to balance that with humbleness. And it is such a dichotomy, and it is so very difficult. So, that was really, really great to hear that reinforced. It sounds like the research is still there.
Collins talks about the Stockdale paradox, right? That you have to confront the reality, don't be in denial, but also have the faith, the confidence, and the hope that you can get through it, you can succeed. And balancing that is the key, because in either direction out of balance, you're basing your assumptions on an illusion or an imperfect picture, an incomplete assessment of the situation. And you're either going to fall into despair, or you're going to be so optimistic without confronting reality that you're going to get yourself into trouble. And so that balance is really critical. And that Stockdale paradox is such a great concept.
A good example of that, I've never heard, I don't know that term, Stockdale paradox, but from when you were explaining it, really reminds me of what we just witnessed with the elections. You had the Trump camp and kind of some circle of people around him feeding him with this idea that, he didn't even doubt it, right? He was the opposite. He's like, this really did get stolen, and this really, and it just made his whole worldview wrong, because he was almost overconfident that he knew all the answers. I think we saw the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, I've heard it talked about that, right? Younger entrepreneurs, almost if they haven't had their great humbling moment, they will have their day of reckoning. And, it happens to all of us. Like when you have some of these really humbling moments, that helps you balance in the future, maybe even too far on the humble side. But certainly I have seen some young, really, bigger, like wildly talented people, but until they've had that humbling moment, I just smile because I know it's coming.
Yeah. There's two things about those humbling moments, and really about failure in general, that I've come to believe. And that is, one is that failure is only really failure if you learn nothing. And so you don't fail unless you refuse to learn. If you don't draw anything from the situation, you don't come away from it with any new knowledge or understanding, then yes, you can chalk it up to failure. But if you're a learner, then that's almost never the case. And the second is that failure is part of success. There's a whole section in my book where I talk about so many of the successful people. For instance, Babe Ruth, who was called the Sultan of SWAT, who held all these Major League Baseball records for years and years. He was also called the King of Strikeouts, and he held the Major League strikeout record for 30 years until it was beaten by Mickey Mantle. So these guys that we think of as big successes, they also had huge failures, but they understood that failure is part of success. They had those big swings and big successes because they took big risks, and they had to have failures along the way, but they didn't see it that way. They just saw every strikeout is one step closer to the next home run.
It's almost like a stock in a company, right? You haven't lost money unless you actually sell.
Exactly.
And lock it in. So it's just part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process. There's going to be ups and downs, and you've got to play the long game. You've got to see the value in what you're doing, and not just look at the day-to-day numbers or exactly what you're happening. Yeah, that quote from Michael Jordan is actually in my book as well, and it's a great one. He talks about the fact that that he missed all these key shots, that he had all these isolated incidents of failure, but they were all part of his record of success.
26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed.
Exactly. But no one would call that guy a failure.
No, not at all. And I point that out because I coach baseball. I'm always explaining that to the kids, and I keep track of their batting averages. And the top performers in Little League Baseball are 500 plus batters, right? And the low performers in Little League Baseball are, some do get really low, but the low performers are always like 300 to 500, right? So I always say, hey, look, who's your favorite baseball player out there? what's his batting average, right? And they're usually at like a 250 or 297. And, I got to really drive that message home.
Yeah.
We have time for one or two more questions. Lance, you're still with us. You good on time? Okay. Mark, do you have a question for anybody? Since you're up here, you've asked one.
Yeah, for Kris, what role does emotional intelligence play in overcoming imposter syndrome?
That is a great question, and one that I hadn't really considered. So I'm admittedly going to think out loud here. And I've studied emotional intelligence, and so I understand the concept. I think it really, particularly the self awareness and self-regulation side of emotional intelligence, is really, really important and valuable. That's a skill and a muscle that you need to develop, because when imposter syndrome really starts to eat away at you, when it's really sort of giving you a hard time, there's going to be a heightened sense of anxiety. There's going to be a heightened sense of fear. There's going to be that fight or flight response, sort of instinctually. And being aware of those things and recognizing that I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling fearful, but I can turn those emotions into excitement or motivation or drive. And I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago in Fast Company magazine about this very thing, about the idea of turning your anxiety into excitement and reframing those negative emotions into positive ones, rather than trying to suppress them or eliminating them. Because the truth is, when you're anxious, when you're in a heightened state, it is very difficult to just calm down. Like, that's some of the worst advice you can give somebody who's nervous or anxious about something, is just to say, calm down. And instead, a more effective approach is to translate that energy into something positive. So anxiety is the expectation of something negative happening, whereas excitement is the expectation of something positive happening. They're both expectations. And so it's really easy to make that shift if you change your mindset about the feelings that you're having in the moment. So I think that kind of awareness of, this is the emotion I'm feeling, this is what it means for me, and this is what it's likely to translate into in terms of how I perform if I let it continue to be negative, and then shifting the mentality about that emotion to something positive can really help you in those moments where the imposter can drag you down and give you degrade your performance out of a fear, rather than amping up your performance out of excitement. Great question, Mark.
That.
Thank you.
I love that. It's like two sides of a coin. That's beautiful.
It is. Uh-oh, Ryan, you're muted.
Okay, very eloquently put, but can you rehash, when you were talking about expectations? I feel like I missed one of your words in there, because when you were speaking of expectations. So anxiety or nervousness is largely it's a feeling, it's an excitement about or a heightened sense of expectation of something negative, right? If I'm anxious about this interview, then I'm nervous that it's going to go wrong or go badly. But excitement is a very similar emotion. It's a similar stimulus, the physical stimulus going on in your body, but it's anticipation of something good happening. I'm excited because I think this interview is going to be great and it's going to be fun and I'm going to enjoy it. And so when you feel yourself having those butterflies, or you're nervous or you're scared that something bad's going to happen, just simply telling yourself, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And I'm not anticipating a bad outcome, I'm anticipating a great outcome. Then you don't have to suppress those feelings, which is very hard to do. You just change the narrative around those feelings. Yeah, and that's kind of feeds back into, we didn't say it earlier, but the whole idea of pushing through it, right? The whole fake it till you make it. And you have to train your mind to kind of shield. You can't avoid the thoughts that come, but you can kind of shield and then react to them. Jeremiah, I have a feeling you want to add to that.
I was going to say two things. One message we heard consistently in martial arts was anxiety is a fear of the future, depression is a fear of the past. You haven't reconciled those things in your brain. That leads to some of these kind of knee-jerk responses that maybe you're not pleased with the outcome of, because you were being kind of led by these two emotions that are kind of unstable, and you alluded to that. And the other part was that I read this article maybe like a year and a half ago, and they did a study of people that claim to be anxious and people that claim to be excited, and their physiological responses were the same.
Almost identical. Yes.
Almost identical. Same thing. And so it comes down to what your dialogue is upstairs, and how do you use that as fodder to the anxiousness to turn into excitement, and you really nailed it, saying like I'm afraid of the outcome of this. Mm-hmm. Like, what if I totally fail? And then you have to just take a step back and say, well, what are the real implications of that? What am I really losing? Like, if you're jumping off a cliff, maybe you should honor it. But if it's a step into something, then maybe like if it's you taking a step in a direction that may make you money, but if you might not really lose anything if you take the step, then what are you really? Is it your ego? Are you just concerned about your reputation? Like, you have to take a moment to ask yourself those questions, and then proceed with caution if it's not a cliff.
Yes.
I see people all the time put all this fearful thought into things that could happen before the thing that would make those things even have a chance to happen occurs. Yeah. And it's like, it's such a, and I don't know if that's tied into self-doubt, but I see it all the time. Like, why are you feeding thought into that when it can't even possibly happen until this happens?
Yeah.
So
we expend a lot of energy trying to solve problems that haven't yet happened.
Yeah.
Trying to mentally
don't even have a chance to happen sometimes.
Mentally prepare for things that are highly unlikely or, just part of our imagination. And so that's again back to that question about emotional intelligence. You have to recognize when you're just building yourself up in a negative way and getting yourself, amped and excited, and change the narrative around that. Don't dwell on those those highly unlikely negative outcomes that can freak us out so easily if we let them.
Well, listen, guys, we're at the top of the hour. I like to be true to my time. I know, Lance, you got to go. So if you want to go ahead and pop off. Thank you, Lance, for lining this up with Jeremiah. And
thanks, Lance.
Today.
Thanks so much, guys. So much fun. We'll talk to you all soon. Looking forward to Clubhouse with you, Kris.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing that up, Lance. So just folks, just a little reminder here is, not reminder, I haven't even mentioned it. So Lance runs a Clubhouse room every Thursday. I want to say it's about noon. Yeah, it's noon on Thursdays, Eastern. And that's how Jeremiah and Mark, that's how I know Jeremiah and Mark is from the group. And Kris is going to be joining us next week on that group. It's called The Hot Seat. And so far what we've done is we invite people up and new people get a chance to be on the hot seat. We usually have 2 or 3 people in the hot seat. What we're going to do next week is we're going to let Kris open things up in the room and kind of present the whole idea of the book and speak to imposter syndrome. Then we're going to open up the Clubhouse room to be a panel discussion. It'll be like this, just with more people and no video. So very similar idea.
And Ryan, by the way, I'm not nervous about that. I'm excited about being on the hot seat. So
there you go. I got to work through my anxiety on that one a little bit. No, I've learned, and I just wrote about this because I do epilogues for celebrities that impacted my life. And I finally wrote my eulogy, if you will, not epilogue, eulogy for Robin Williams. And and what I share in that eulogy is the impact that Robin Williams had on me. I knew who Robin Williams was most of my life, but when I was a teenager, I was watching him perform. It was, Robin Williams live at the Met, and he's out there making people laugh and being a goofball. And it seemed at the time like a good 15, 20 minutes. I just rewatched it, and it was only about 6 or 7 minutes into his show, but he actually took a step back and he was like, I'm nervous as shit. And like, it made me realize what he was going through. And I was a teenager, so I couldn't appreciate as much the anxiety that he was working through. And he just seemed so in control and in command of the room. But he was, and he was anxious, and that's natural.
Yeah.
You're not. If you don't feel anxious, I think that's a problem. That means you're missing some sort of, I don't know,
Yeah.
you're missing something there. You should be anxious to some degree.
Yeah, Brene Brown recently talked about that. She said that, as much experience as she has on big stages and talking, she says, of course, I still get nervous when I'm going out in front of people. There's thousands of people giving me their time and attention, and that's really, really valuable. I should be nervous. I should care about how I perform. I should be, extra aware of what I do and don't do. And to not be nervous is to not respect the enormity of that opportunity that I have. I thought that was really, really well said.
Mm-hmm. So don't try to eliminate your anxiety. Just know what it means.
Reframe it.
And then how to respond to it. Well, great, guys. Thanks so much. Very good discussion. Jeremiah, I'm glad we pulled this off. Shouts out to Mark for helping line this up and for both of you making it here.
Yes, thank you, guys. It was great to be here as well.
Thank you. My pleasure. Super awesome. I look forward to that clubhouse room. I'll definitely be there.
8 days. We'll see you there. All right, guys. Yes. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So that was Kris Kelso, author of Overcoming the Imposter, and Jeremiah Fox, entrepreneur and restaurateur in the New York area. And like I said, next week on Thursday for Lance's clubhouse room, it's called the Hot Seat for Small Businesses. We're going to all be back. Kris is going to do an audio presentation to the group, and then we're going to get into this conversation. So if you'd like information on that clubhouse, just reach out to myself or Lance. And just as a reminder, folks, you can head on over to AutoConversion.net, get yourself subscribed. And the reason why is because when we put events like this together, we're going to do this every month. But we also, throughout the month, have other events that we do as well. So if you want access to these events coming into them, get yourself subscribed to AutoConversion.net, and you can see what we have laid out, and you'll have a link to the recording. While you're there, look at the Grow menu and check out our B2B Marketing Pros discussion group and mastermind program. It's a free discussion group that anyone can join and participate in. That gives you access to be on panels like this. And then we do some other stuff behind the scenes. We also do a lot of work on Clubhouse as well. So it is a discussion group for B2B marketing and sales professionals, as you can see here in front of you, to explore ideas and hacks and technologies for omni-channel marketing. I am Ryan Girardi, and thanks again for being here. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to go ahead and shut down, and we'll be back, I guess, a month from now. So thanks again to everybody involved today. Have a great rest of the week, and we will see you soon.